My name is Mike Tellerino, the CEO of K9 for Veterans. I'm here with John Jans and Jillian Jans.
Hello.
Hello.
Tonight, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
My name is Jonathan Jans. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was in from 2004 to 2008. While I was in Iraq, ended up getting hit by a roadside bomb and came home and got a lot of assistance. I use that assistance now. I use that assistance and now have started my own company to help pay forward that assistance.
What's the name of your organization, John? Why don't you tell them?
Our organization is Cheers to the Warriors, and then Cheers to the Warriors is doing business as Warrior Vodka. So we've got a couple of things going on.
What do you do for the veterans through Cheers to the Warrior?
We provide financial grants directly to combat injured veterans. Warrior Vodka, we sell and give 80% of our profits directly to those injured veterans through Cheers to the Warriors. So it's a self-sustaining fundraiser, essentially.
Okay, John, tonight we're here to talk about PTSD. When were you first aware that you had PTSD, and diagnosed with it?
Diagnosed or first aware?
First aware.
So right after I got back from Iraq, I skipped all of the post-deployment medical assessments that would typically happen because my dad was real sick. I got sent home to be with him, and for about 6 months I was home without any knowledge or training or anything about what to expect after deployment, especially a very rough combat deployment. So I started noticing things almost as soon as I got home. Not liking going outside or big groups of people, hyperactivity, hypervigilance, all those things I just thought were normal because that's what we'd been doing for the last 7 months while over in Iraq. And come to find out, that is not exactly normal, and should have been seeking some assistance, but didn't know any better.
What made you go for help?
I was sent for help, actually. I was going through training. I was trying to get into reconnaissance, and at school I started having a lot of problems. And after I had blacked out, I got sent to get my brain scanned at the DVBIC, the Defensive Veterans Brain Injury Center, and they found that I had a traumatic brain injury. And from there, I got essentially sidelined for medical treatment.
You guys weren't married before
No.
any of this. You were high school. You were high school sweethearts, right?
Yeah, we met when we were 16 and we dated off and on. We were off. We met when we were 16. We were off before he went to boot camp, and then we were back on before he went to Iraq. We were together through the last month before he got home, and we had broken up, and then we got back together right after his diagnosis of his PTSD and TBI and all of that, and then we've been together since then. So.
Jill, how different was John from when you were dating him or when you knew him until after he came home? Was there a significant change in his behavior? Or?
There's been about 4 stages of John that I've kind of tracked. There's the guy who I met in high school, who he was a complete jerk, excuse my language, but he was. And then there's the guy who I ran into after he had gone through boot camp and was getting ready to go to Iraq. And that guy was a Marine, and he was so chivalrous, and he was so thoughtful and kind and sweet. And then there was the guy who had just got his diagnosis, and he was hurting, and he was different, and there was so many different things about him that I couldn't even put my finger on one of them to describe to you. But then there's where he is now, which is a lot more stable, but still obviously every day impacted and affected by his PTSD and TBI.
So it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. It's worth it, though. He's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I've known John for a while now.
Yeah.
And I can agree with that. John, how has your life changed since you were diagnosed with PTSD. What's a day like for you? You know, I mean, how do you get through a day?
That's a tough question. Mainly because of the traumatic brain injury and the post-traumatic stress disorder. So many of the symptoms overlap.
Comorbid conditions.
Thank you. Comorbid conditions. It's hard to decipher which is from which symptom goes along with which ailment, and with the TBI, I have a lot of memory problems. So in average day, I don't really have an average day that I can recall. Every day is different, and it's. You know what? I'm gonna pass this one off. Joe, what's an average day for me?
He has like a cycle. There's an average 2 weeks for him. There's an average 2 weeks where he will have a difficult time getting out of bed and functioning like a normal human being that would get up and do things around the house.
Have a routine.
And exactly. So those days he's struggling with the side effects of his traumatic brain injury and medications and all that kind of stuff. The other 2 weeks are when his medications are working properly. He is functioning like a average adult, and he gets out of bed and does whatever he needs to do for his business, takes care of the kids, we both do, and then we have our meals and all of that. It's just a lot of reminding him of things and making sure that he follows through with them, because he doesn't have the drive to do them with the PTSD, and he doesn't have the memory to do them with the TBI. So it's that.
It's a lot harder to do things now. I know that since coming home and being diagnosed, just getting out in general is more of a dread than anything. Even walking my daughter up the street to get some ice cream is
Anxiety inducing.
anxiety inducing. Indeed, I was going to say a pain in the, but it's just something that I have to factor in. You know, hey, I'm back home. I'm okay. Everything's going to be fine.
Is that what gets you through the day?
My wife gets me through the day. My wife and family, and that's without a doubt. But it's just.
So she's your biggest support group.
Oh, absolutely.
Jill, if I'm correct, you're John's caretaker as
I'm
well.
his caregiver, yes.
Caregiver.
The VA.
What does that consist of?
That consists of me assisting with his activities of daily living, which go from anything like making sure that his medications are managed, to his doctor appointments are managed, to that he's showering and taking care of his hygiene. It's hard for me to. The best example I give is of medication taking, because I can give him his medications, and if I don't stand there and watch him take it, he could set them down and then turn around to do something else and forget. And then 4 hours have
Forget
gone
to take
by,
them.
and he's
Right.
now not acting like he normally would be with his medications.
Is there
and I
much of a
realize
difference from when he doesn't take his medication?
there's an absolutely huge difference. And he
Tonight, one of them.
Yes. And on top of that, I should mention, before he was diagnosed with any of this stuff, he wouldn't take a Tylenol. Like,
Right.
he was very against any sort of medication. And when he got out of the Marine Corps and was starting in the VA, he was on 18 different medications
Wow.
a day.
18?
18 different. And
Wow.
when you give 18 medications to somebody who has no short-term memory and has no awareness of how many times they're taking them, what they're supposed to be taking, and can't keep track of that.
So that's what, as a caregiver, you
Yes.
do.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I do. But that's one of the biggest. That's how I got involved with it, because he'd gotten prescribed a medication that was a black label medication, so it can kill you
Just by
pretty much
itself.
instantly. I mean, so not to mention taking the wrong dose and how it would interact with any other medications. And when I saw that, I was infuriated, and I called his doctor, and I'm like, what is this? Like, oh, well, it's, we didn't mention it, or we didn't send anything home with them because we didn't think. And I'm like,
They
you
didn't
can't,
think.
right? You can't not think when it comes to these veterans and the things that you're
Right.
prescribing them, the things that they're gonna have to deal with when they come home. That's not okay. And at the time, they didn't have a caregiver program yet. That came around in 2000 and when he was he born yet? Yeah, it was like 2011, 2012, I would say.
When I first got home, she actually quit her very successful career. She was managing a salon studio. I don't know. It was
I think-
whatever. She was doing really well. She had a huge client list, and she gave all of that up when she saw how wrong everything was going with me. And still, some of the as she's talking, some things are popping into my mind. Like I will get lost for hours if I'm not taking my meds, and it's just time spent. I've got. Oh, this is gonna set the vet stereotype back a couple of years again, but I've got a pellet gun that I sit in my backyard and I will shoot targets for hours on end, and that's something that is my stress reliever that calms me down, but at the same time, that just takes up my whole day, and if I'm not doing that, I'm
he gets
not-
lost in it.
not having that weapon in my hand.
John, what are
is
some
a
of your
huge-
triggers?
Some of my triggers, anything from a pothole and garbage on the road if I'm driving, to abandoned buildings or high rises, groups.
When we were living in the college town we were living in, there was one night. Now John hasn't drank since 2007. And this was many years after that. We got pulled over on our way home from his work because he had swerved around a pothole. And they're like, well, you're drunk. And he said, well, no, give me a breathalyzer or give me a, field sobriety test. I'm happy to comply either way. And they were harassing him, saying that he shouldn't be driving then. I said, if there's a child out at 3 o'clock in the morning, we got a bigger problem than whether he's swerving
Yeah,
around a
right.
pothole or not. So, and then I ended up calling like the chief of that police department. But that's a huge another part of what I do is the advocating for him, because it's not fair in my mind, or in my opinion, a logical person's mind, the way that you get put into a stereotype when you are diagnosed with PTSD.
Do you think people, when they find out that John has PTSD, that they treat him differently?
Absolutely. One
How
of the
do they
things
treat him?
he hates when people call him buddy. Like as soon as somebody finds out, especially in the civilian world, that he has PTSD, it's like, oh, okay, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
And
How's
it's
it going?
Like
Really?
He's a grown man, and he's
Yeah.
got an
He's a
injury.
Marine.
Right, exactly. Like there's nothing about him that should be, hey, buddy.
Hey, little buddy, how you doing?
And
How you doing today?
it's at the same time, I understand people are trying to be empathetic, and it's not an insult that they mean to happen, but it does affect him. And one of the biggest ways that we, as who we are in our places in the veteran community, is we are very open and honest about his PTSD and our experiences and his injuries, because the only way to set off a stigma and stereotype is to stop making it such a secret and to stop
Well,
holding back that kind of
awareness,
stuff.
and I think that's what we're
Absolutely.
here tonight for. I want John to really let people in our audience know exactly what it's like to have PTSD. Don't sugarcoat it.
Right.
Tell it like it is. Let them know.
And we never do.
Yeah, no, really, seriously,
It's-
that's what you're here for tonight.
It's
Let 'em-
so you come home and I have no idea what was going on. There'd be most of the time you're just furious, just angry, because that apparently is a secondary emotion, that if you feel any type of emotion at
Right.
all, you cover it up with anger. Anger and aggression.
We learned that in therapy.
We learned that in therapy. But come home angry all the friggin' time, no matter what. Even if it's a perfect day, I will find something that's pissing me off. And then at other times, you just cry for no reason. It'll be, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's sunny, you're not thinking about anything, and you will just start crying uncontrollably.
What's the worst part of your day? Night, mornings, afternoons?
It,
Is there?
they all run together. It doesn't.
The nights are the biggest struggle for him.
Nights.
Apparently, the nights are the biggest struggle for me.
Yeah.
Listen to Joe.
Right.
It's
But
his physical injuries. He has a he's got cerebral stenosis now, they're saying, so it affects his hands and arms and his ability to move them. That affects him during the day. At night is when like the memories and the thoughts he can't help, all that kind of stuff starts flooding back to him, and then it'll be impacted also by whatever he's watched on TV that day. He doesn't play video games. That kind of we nixed that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But if he's talked with another veteran within the past hour or two and shared an experience, or if he
Right.
looks over and sees something that reminds, anything is going to then affect the way that he's thinking and whatever at nighttime, and that's quiet, so it's easy for him to think.
John,
It's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's never like when you're talking about triggers or things I look and see or talk to another vet, it's never I want to go out on a shooting rampage and destroy people.
So
or
it's not
destroy,
postal.
No,
I'm not
absolutely
going
not.
postal. I'm not trying to hurt anybody or
No.
anything.
Do you think people have that misconception?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest
That's the worst, is that they think that
stereotype or
that veterans
or
are a threat to other people.
thought.
And
Right.
most veterans that I know with PTSD, I would say the vast majority of them have more anger and aggressiveness and all of that towards themselves, because they blame themselves for things that happen, because they
Right.
see that what they're dealing with as veterans as something that they can only understand. So everything goes internal instead of external. So they're not a threat to anybody else. It's themselves that they're a threat
Let
to.
me ask you a question. Why do you think 22 veterans a day take their life? As a veteran with PTSD,
There's
what do you think is the contributing factor there
honestly
that pushes that button?
there's a few different things. One, I think if you look at the amount of medications that we're on, like she was saying earlier with the
18.
with the TBI, I was on 18. I had an accidental overdose and woke up the next day and was surprised that I woke up
still
the next
there.
day. Not just that, but survivor's guilt. If you survive something that you shouldn't have, or you make it out and one of your friends didn't, or they're injured, or they got, there's one of the things I fault myself with all the time. One of my big survivor guilt moments is when her and I broke up. I was over in Iraq and got a little angry. Was told probably should sit a patrol out just to make sure we didn't take it out on anybody. And my squad was doing an overnight patrol at a house, or an overnight OP and observation, and they got ambushed. And one of the team leaders took a round in the neck and got killed. And as a saw gunner, had I been there, I should have been able to stop the vehicle that was driving with the individual inside of it that shot that round. But
You
with
feel as
I
if-
feel right, but
Right.
because I wasn't there, in my mind, because I wasn't there, one of our team leaders got killed, and it weighs on me heavily every day. And
John, what do you, you're getting help from the VA for this, right?
yes,
What's it like to get therapy? What are they,
it depends on what type of therapy it is and whether the therapist is any good. I went to therapy at the VA for years, for 5 or 6 years before finding
Somebody who
a
is
vet center in.
that's a significant thing with the PTSD, that if you want to talk about something that is unknown and not talked about a lot, is a dissociative episode, which is what John suffered in 2012. A lot of people think that flashbacks are what you see in the movies, that they think that they're back in combat and they dig a foxhole in the backyard. That's not what happens for the majority of veterans. What happens is the emotions and feelings and experiences that they didn't deal with in combat, that they're trained not to, that they put in a box on a shelf somewhere, that they've never now taken down and dealt with, come out whenever it's too much for them, whenever they've been triggered. And trauma anniversaries are a big time for that, because 6 weeks before and 6 weeks after a trauma anniversary, you are being triggered by anything from the time of year to the temperature to the smells to the everything. And that time, it was November 1st, it was right around Veterans Day, and we had spoken at a school. He had been in his gear, and there's a few other triggers that day, and that night came around and he had a dissociative episode where he broke with reality and was feeling all of the emotions that he couldn't control. I didn't know what it was called then, though.
Right.
This was many, many years ago, and I had no idea how to help him. I dropped to the floor and got out a rosary and said the rosary, because what else am I going to do? I couldn't So then fast forward to a few hours later when he's had me zip tie his hands behind his back because he was scared of what he was capable of. And that was a few moments of clarity he would have in this cycle that when he eventually was able to clearly think things through, it was made sense as to why that happened. I got all of the weapons out of the house. We did that. But then I called the Veterans Crisis Line. And the Veterans Crisis Line told me that they could not help, that there was, that I should take him to the nearest mental health place and pretty
That
much
was
sign
their
him
answer.
over. Yeah,
Yeah.
so sign him
Nice.
over.
Call the police.
Nice.
Or you can call the police and tell them
Nice.
that you have a
Great-
veteran in crisis,
Great answer.
which a lot of the things that we've made progress with in the past few years as a veteran community, as part of the veteran community, they now know how to handle things a lot better, especially locally, we found out. But the thing is at that point in time, I'm not going to sign him over to a mental health facility because he's not crazy. He's going through something that I can help him through if you just tell me how to help him. And then I'm not going to call a police force that at the time wasn't
no
prepared
idea
to deal with
how to
a
handle
combat
it.
veteran.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then he's going to see as a
Yeah.
threat. So he's
Right.
going to react accordingly. So
A reaction causes a reaction.
Exactly. So a few hours later, he had his cousin zip tie him to the bed, and he slept a little bit. He was
That was one of those. It sounds crazy and even laughable, but
No.
I had never experienced anything like this before, emotionally or physically, and I genuinely was scared of myself. I didn't know.
and I heard him, and he was banging his head off the bathroom wall and then
and-
weeping, and I didn't know what to do with that.
John, for a veteran who's coming home, what would you tell him the warning signs are? What would you tell him when would you tell him to go get help? What are some of the
Before-
symptoms?
when you get home.
Yep. Regardless, go get help.
When you get home, you're going to do a post-deployment screening, which they ask you if you had seen any combat, if you've seen anybody injured or killed, if you injured or killed anyone, and your unit typically tells you just say no to everything. And if you actually did experience these things, there's a reason they're asking these questions. Be honest with you. Everybody's going to look at you like you expect they
Right.
would, but at the same time, you're helping yourself. If
And nobody else is going to do that
that's
for
that's
you.
the time, as soon as you can, begin to address it.
Absolutely.
Your family's going to suffer. The divorce rate among
Oh,
vets is
so-
insanely high,
Yeah.
and among combat vets, when I was in the Marine Corps, the divorce rate was 110%. No joke, that was a statistic. And among deployed or individuals that had been deployed, it was even higher than that. So
You need to
that's-
share with your spouse
Exactly.
a lot
I
of
was
the
just gonna
things.
ask you.
crazy.
Of the wife of a veteran with PTSD, what would you tell other wives to watch for, or when would you tell them to make sure they get the help they need?
I would say, to back up what he said, regardless of whether or not you think they need it yet, be encouraging of them getting help just in case. You
Learn.
can help keep your car maintained by getting regular oil changes. You have a problem when it's broken down and you have to fix the whole thing all over again. It's the same thing with the human brain and body and spirit. You can't fix something as easily when it's broken already. You need to be doing proper maintenance all through the whole time. And regardless, you've gone through something as a couple through the deployment that needs to be helped through some sort of counseling or therapy or whatever you want to take it as.
Right. Yeah.
But
So,
try and understand the lingo, the terms,
Right.
as a spouse while they're gone.
And
that was hugely effective and helpful
Right.
for us. If she knew what I was talking about,
I learned everything.
Wow.
she did.
John and
So
Jillian, I want to thank both of you.
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Excuse
Mike.
my voice.
No,
I've got
you're fine.
bronchitis, so I apologize to the audience as well. But I want to thank both of you. You know, it's important that our audience and people in general understand that PTSD is nothing to be afraid of.
Absolutely
Right.
not.
Awareness is the biggest part
Absolutely.
of what we can do and what we do for veterans with PTSD. So again, for you to come on tonight and share your experiences with us meant a lot to us. It really has.
Help is
Thank you.
available.
Yes.
If you're hurting,
Reach out.
seek assistance. There's any number of agencies that are set up to help you out. If you can't find one, feel free to check us out. Send me a message personally.
Yeah.
And
And we're both on
Thank
Facebook.
you.
Find us there.
Yeah, and Jen, what's your website for,
so cheerstothewarriors.org or warriorvodka.org. You can
Or find
locate
us on Facebook,
Or
please.
find us on Facebook.
okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.